so hard with the camera staring at me. Hey guys, my name is not Alex, my name is Hannah, and I'm here to talk to you guys about the Zet Kayaks 5. So I've been paddling the 5 for a whole season now, and when I first started this season, I was still pretty timid in Class 4 water, but this boat has really helped me progress into being confident in Class 4 water and even paddling my first Class 5 rapids. The thing that I like most about the 5 is the semi-displacement hull, which makes it really easy to hip steer. For me, as a smaller paddler, that's really important because I don't always necessarily have the muscle to be able to turn 9 feet of boat on a dime to make a line. The 5, like all Zet boats, is also slalom inspired. So it has a really flowy feel to it and it's fast, which I also really enjoyed. That combination helped me punch holes with more steam than I was ever able to before, especially when they were kind of at an angle instead of coming straight at me. This boat was able to stay straight and on line and cut straight across them in a way that other displacement holes that I've tried have not been able to. At 135 pounds, I usually find that I'm somewhere in between the weight range of a small boat and a medium boat, but the 5 was one of those rare gems that floated me just perfect. The 5 was the first boat I've paddled that gave me a high and dry ride while still being pretty easy to control. Even though this boat is 9 feet, it has a really light construction, partially because the outfitting is pretty much just foam. And it was really only a couple pounds heavier than the small Nomad that I used to paddle. Because the 5 was so light, it helped me not look like an idiot trying to get my boat on and off my car, which was great. And I feel like it also just generally made it easier for me to maneuver. The outfitting is light, simple, and comfortable, but one of the drawbacks I feel like is that the hip pads are kind of narrow. So my hips are 37 inches around, which is not particularly large, but it still felt like a tight squeeze at times. Especially for female paddlers with larger hips, you might be able to take the factory hip pads out and replace them with something slimmer, but I would definitely keep that in mind. The semi-displacement hull on this boat really is the best of both worlds. You have just enough edge to be able to punch holes, stay on line, stay straight in big squirrely water, but you have enough displacement hull at the same time to rock bounce and not get hung up like you might in a planing hull. That said, this boat definitely does still skip though, which is one of my favorite feelings from a planing hull, and I'm really glad that it's maintained in this boat. Speaking of rock bouncing, I should probably address the durability of this boat. I keep talking about how light this thing is, which I know for some people immediately sparks some concerns over durability and thickness of the plastic. And I admit, if you look at the bottom, there definitely are some scratches in there, but honestly, these are pretty much purely cosmetic. If I push on it, it doesn't feel like it flexes any easier than when I first got it. And my 5, after one season of rock scraping, looks pretty much equivalent to someone's 5 that I saw on the lower yacht who had been scraping that for about 3 years. So if you were to put the 5 next to one of the creek boats that came out this year, this is a medium Scorch. One of the things that you'll notice is that the rocker profile is actually shockingly similar, even though the 5 came out a few years ago. It's hard to see on camera, honestly, and to see any difference myself, I did have to crawl underneath, but pretty much the bow rocker comes to exactly the same height. The only difference is kind of the shape and how long it takes to get there. So in the Scorch, the shape of that bow is really aggressive, whereas in the 5, it does taper a little more slowly. Basically what that does is it means that more of the hull of the 5 is going to be in contact with the water at any given point in time. And I think that's part of what makes it such a consistent ride, because it's not trying to jump over things immediately. It gives you a little more time to get to the same point. I think that would be a major advantage of this boat for someone who's more on the beginner intermediate side compared to those super aggressive new models. And I have to say that even though the 5 doesn't have the extremely aggressive bow rocker like the more modern boats, it was still plenty to be forgiving. I definitely blew a couple of boofs and it took care of me just fine. So I talked about the 5 in low water and how well it rock bounces, but what about in big water? So I did have a chance to test it in some pretty big water. I committed to safety boating for a raft trip, and the water surged 5,000 CFS overnight, and it was almost too high. Honestly, I didn't find that paddling the 5 at big water was much different from paddling the 5 at lower water. It just had the exact same predictability and consistency, which was awesome. Overall, this boat gets a lot of hype from those of us who are smaller paddlers, and I think deservedly so. Part of what's so special about paddling the 5 is that it really feels like it was made for me in a sport where every single boat was designed by a man. Part of that comes from the slalom-inspired nature of Zet, where they design boats that will really reward technical paddling. As long as I give the boat the correct input, like the right paddle stroke, I'm leaning the right way, it will just do its job without having to be forced to do so. One thing I feel like the 5 didn't do really well is surf. So if you're someone who likes to be surfing in your creek boat, this is maybe not the boat for you, but personally, I felt that that was a feature because if I am surfing in my creek boat, something has gone horribly wrong. Something else I found out by accident is that the 5 is really stable in a side surf. Again, I think it comes back to that semi-displacement hull. You don't have those really sharp edges that are going to immediately flip you in a hole, but you do have enough that you can still maneuver yourself a little bit, but you have enough time to think in that situation first. For slightly larger paddlers who are maybe closer to the 150, 175 range, you may want to consider the Cross, which has a very similar design with a little bit more volume. Other boats that female paddlers my size might consider checking out are the small Alpha and the small and or the medium code, depending on how much boat you really want. And I'm hoping I'll be able to review some of those in the future as well. Thanks for watching. I hope this was helpful, and I'll see you on the river.
I hope you guys enjoyed that as well. Hannah found out today that this is a lot harder than it looks. In all seriousness, though, it has been so incredibly rewarding to watch her just grow in this boat, watch the design both give her enough room to grow, but challenge her enough to get better at the same time without being a warm blanket. And just generally, we've both decided that we want to do more to elevate female voices. There's only 2% of this channel that is going to female viewers, and just generally, that's unacceptable.
Trouble apologizes for any weird audio that may have been... Rowdy wants to apologize for any strange background noises. If you put the 5 next to some of the other creek boats that came out this year, like the 5 or... not the 5. I made a you mistake.
Yeah, you did me.
I think that was it because I forgot all that I just said.
That's how you know you got it.